goes back to the issue of how history is defined. And how is it defined, Lori?
Well, first I want to start by commending you for your idealism about how the whole story is told in America, and I think you're thinking like President Obama, where the potential of America is what we have to look forward to, because unfortunately, with regard to this textbook issue, the African people, people of African descent, their story has never been wholly told. But, to directly answer your question, you're talking about the textbooks that are being produced in Texas that are going to influence basically the entire country for the next decade, because they are trying to rewrite history by adding certain conservative influences. They want to talk more about things like the National Rifle Association. They want to talk about, various things that they want to add Confederacy, Confederate opinions alongside with Lincoln's opinions. They want
like President Jefferson Davis of the Confederacy, his comments is alongside President Lincoln's.
Yeah, they actually want to, and it's laughable, but not really. They actually want to water down the civil rights movement. Like there's enough in there already. I mean, I can tell you honestly that the things that I read about the civil rights movement outside of school shocked me how little we know about the civil rights movement. And they want to, water that down within the system. They also, I heard recently that they want to rename the slave trade to the triangular trade. And, I guess that'll get rid of some of the guilt. But I think it's ironic that they even want to do that, because, even if you were going to do that, and I might get off on a little rant, if you weren't going to do that, if you're going to explain exactly what the triangular trade was, then you're still going to keep the facts straight. And as we've talked about before in the show, the triangular trade was they were producing wool and trinkets and various things in England. So they had an industry there. Then they would bring those across to Africa. They would try and trade those trinkets out there. They would actually pick up enslaved, Africans, bring them to the Caribbean or to America, drop them off, and then pick up the cotton and the sugar and all the other stuff that the slave labor, I should say the labor of the enslaved people, because I don't like calling them slaves.
Right.
The labor of the enslaved people had created, and then bring those back to England. So that was the triangle that was created. Now, are they going to be as clear as to the fact that it's still as heinous as it was if you call it the slave trade or if you call it the triangular trade? Or are they going to make it sound like, just a normal business transaction? I mean, all of these things are ridiculous. And what disturbs me the most about this is because we already have certain issues within the school system of, testing, where they're asking questions with phraseology that, why is America the best, why is democracy the best system? Things that if a child answers that differently, that they're going to fail a test, whether or not you slanted in a certain direction. Now they're trying to slant the actual textbooks so that they're pushing this conservative viewpoint on the minds of young people.
What about their argument that there was a liberal viewpoint that was out there that didn't tell the full story? Shouldn't the contract of America be included? Shouldn't the whole period of Reaganism in the 80s and stuff like that and the whole conservative movement be spoken about?
Well, I think a lot of these issues need to be examined carefully, because the problem is not whether or not they're discussed, it's how they're discussed and how they're presented. Because
how they're weighted.
Yeah, how they're weighted, because you're now going to be influencing, and especially since you're influencing young minds. These aren't adults who can make, logical decisions and who can sit up there and say, well, I agree with this or I disagree. You're going to have young people who are thinking that this is the gospel fact depending on how you present it. And we've already had this movement over the past few years of trying to ingratiate the Confederacy. You lost. You lost.
Virginia?
Forget about trying to hang your flag in front of the courthouse, and forget about trying to, put all of these viewpoints out there. If you're going to start doing that, first of all, you're promoting the values that went with the Confederacy, which I think they should be ashamed of. But if they're not, you have to look at the fact that this is now going to be influencing an entire system of education, which hopefully we should have a little bit more pride in as a country like America.
What was it? What was it, the governor of Virginia? There was the Confederate month or whatever, where they didn't even talk anything about or mention anything about slavery. Very interesting. The whole Confederacy fought to keep slaves and preserve their quote-unquote way of life. And it's not even mentioned in the whole premise of the month. Again, it goes back to accountability, doesn't it? Because when we can change the way history sounds and reads and tastes, then it means that we can also get rid of our accountability, right? Because this is not what you thought it was, okay? This is how it really happened. And the thing that I thought was interesting because, first of all, let's kind of help people with why this is important. Because you say, what the hell does Texas have to do with me reading a book in New York? Well, the reason it is important is because Texas buys more books than any other state. And so these organizations, these books, these people that are producing these books cater to the philosophy of what Texas is looking for. Okay? So that's why it's important what's going on in Texas. Secondly, this is your own fault. Again, I like to blame you. Yes, I'm coming to you directly. You, the American citizen, who has the right and the power to do something all the time, which is to step up. How did this guy get on this board? Well, people voted and put him on this board. You think voting doesn't matter, right? Well, this guy got appointed on this particular educational panel because he had his supporters out there that pushed to get him on. And now, what did you say? This is going to affect generations of kids for
at least the next decade.
The next decade.